America has smashed through another remarkable milestone. Our national debt is now larger than our entire economy. That hasn't happened since World War II. And this time around, it isn't a global conflict, but rather, listen to this, a total bipartisan abdication of making hard choices. That's how the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget described the unwillingness of lawmakers to cut spending. And to be fair, there are many actors from both parties who are responsible for all the borrowing in recent years that made our debt balloon to 100% of GDP. Now, Treasury Secretary Bessent says the Trump administration's plan is to grow the economy in such a way that it balances things out by 2028. But in the meantime, the spending is continuing. We're looking at, in President Trump's second term, another $2 trillion added to the deficit. There was already $4 trillion that was greenlit by congressional Republicans for the president's tax law. Now Congress is looking at the president's proposal for defense spending, which is $1.5 trillion. One of America's top economists from the Minneapolis Fed told me that all of this is going to be a problem, ultimately, for the U.S. economy. The national debt is now larger than the U.S. economy. It exceeds 100% of GDP, going towards a record here. What risk does that pose?
Well, no one knows, how big is the danger zone and when there's going to actually trigger some kind of a crisis. If you look, I know you know this, if you look at the CBO's forecast for where the debt is going, it's absolutely headed to an unsustainable level. Ultimately, this is the job of our fiscal policymakers, Congress, and the executive branch to come together and put us on a sound fiscal trajectory, which we're not on right now. I don't see an immediate crisis brewing, but at some point it's going to be a problem, and ultimately our political system needs to address it.
Welcome back, my beautiful people. Thank you so much for the love and the support that you are showing me. I really, really do appreciate it. Well, if you're in the United States and you feel like things are quite expensive, I want you to sit down, relax, breathe, and remember that things are just getting started. What do I mean when I say this? There's a very high probability. It is not even a very high probability. Research has been released that the United States might be bankrupt. This hasn't come out as a shock to the American people, but they kind of did not expect that. Let's watch their reactions and what they feel about this, and then after that I'm going to give my point of view, and credit belongs to the original creators of the videos that I have used. Stay tuned, my beautiful people.
The U.S. is $40 trillion in debt. Well, have they tried making coffee at home instead of going out and buying a fancy-dancy latte at Starbucks every morning? It adds up,
The United States is so broke.
How broke are we?
The United States is so broke that we have to borrow $2 trillion just to continue to function this year. We would need to sell $2 trillion in treasury bonds just to be able to pay for the things we've already bought. $166 billion a month. We just put forth the big, beautiful bill last year that gave another tax cut to the top 1%. Trump is asking to expand the military budget to $1.4 trillion. And now we can't afford the bills we have because we're now insolvent. And we have to borrow $2 trillion a month, or $2 trillion a year, just to survive. Because they won't tax the top 1% appropriately, and we won't reduce our military spending. But I guess this is what makes America great again, huh, folks?
U.S. national debt just hit $39 trillion, that's trillion with a T, which represents roughly 1 times the U.S. GDP. This is the first time that's happened since the 1940s. I'm your finance brother, and welcome to Macro Monday, an educational series where I'll talk about macroeconomic topics you should follow if you're interested in learning more. So I think the logical question is, what does it mean where U.S. national debt is so high if it hasn't been this high as a percentage of GDP since the 1940s? How did we end up in that position? And what does it mean going forward? The logistical reason that the US has national debt is it spends more than it makes, i.e. it collects less in tax revenue than it spends on various government programs. The second piece of it is you could make an argument that in the short term, this is a subjective one, Growth will increase if you borrow, if you accumulate national debt, right? Because you have more money than you had before, so you can spend on more things. So you can drive growth, drive all these different things from a macro perspective. The flip side of that is the potential con, which is when debt gets too high, as a percent of your budget, you have to spend more and more on interest payments. The position that the US finds itself in now is that 14 to 17% of its annual budget is going towards interest payments on this debt. And so you find yourself in a precarious position where over time, as you borrow more relative to your budget and relative to GDP, you have to spend more of that budget on interest payments associated with that debt. So it can become a double-edged sword where long-term growth is actually inhibited because you're spending more and more on interest payments rather than actual government programs.
So it has just been revealed that Trump has exploded the national debt. It is the largest it has ever been in history. And I don't mean just the number. I mean, our national debt is now larger than the entire US economy. That's disturbing. If Democrats don't take back power in November and rein Trump in from looting the federal government, it will be 100 years before we recover from this. Trump has been liquidating the Federal Reserve. He has been giving money to his friends and his children through government contracts, through unlimited expense accounts so they can buy planes and go on vacations. The head of the FBI, Secretary of Transportation, they're just going on personal trips all over. Not to mention the fact that many of the cuts that will affect everyday people are going into effect after the midterms. He has destroyed this economy. I cannot tell you how important it is that we take back power in November. He's just using the Federal Reserve as his own personal piggy bank. I mean, he's bankrupt every business he's ever owned. What did people think he was going to do?
Well, it's official. The United States is bankrupt. It's insolvent. And this is not according to some wild-eyed left-wing liberal think tank. This is from the Department of the Treasury. The United States has assets of about $6 trillion. It has liabilities of almost $46 trillion. The debt is expected to reach $40 trillion by the end of this year. Just paying the interest on that debt will eat up 16% of federal spending. In 10 years, that number is expected to grow to 26%. That's more than Medicare, that's more than Social Security, that's more than the Pentagon. One of President Donald J. Ponzi's campaign promises was to do something about the debt, to begin paying down the debt. That was the whole point of DOGE, to eliminate government fraud, waste, and abuse so that he could save enough money to start paying down the debt. I suppose that promise has gone the way of lower prices on day one and no more foreign wars. He hasn't allocated one nickel for paying down the debt, and in fact has increased the debt by at least $5 trillion. While the Republicans and the MAGAs complain about illegal immigrants and drag queens, the most dire threat facing this country is the debt. President Ponzi is not only not doing anything about the debt, he's actually exacerbating it. President Ponzi is not fit for his job. And by his own definition, people who are not fit for their jobs deserve to be fired. President Ponzi, do the country a favor. Show yourself to the door. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
So I understand that the coffers are officially bare. America is broke. Like for real, like, when you look at the numbers, I mean, okay, I know I've mentioned this about the debt several times in previous videos, but when you hear it spelled out like America has $6 trillion in assets and almost $49 trillion in debt, who's keeping the motherfucking books? Like, I don't even understand. I think that these folks in these governments, they just been taking money out. Like, I know a lot of things go unpaid for. They keep kicking the can down the road. But if whole money management was a country, damn. I promise you, I know that this bitch is just having like a liquidation sale. Some kind of way he monetizing everything, but this puts things in perspective. Like, I knew at 37, they were like, well, we have enough money to pay the interest on our debt, which is always fucked up. If that's all you're paying is like the interest on your debt or your minimum payment. Like, I don't even understand how somebody with 6 bankruptcies can ever be considered to run a nation with the $30 trillion plus of debt we already had. None of this shit makes sense. And it's curious why Americans keep saying that we the richest country in the world. How is that possible with that kind of debt? Rich in what? Rich in lies? Rich in hypocrisy? Rich in what?
Thank you so much for staying up to this moment and welcome back. Well, as you all have seen, the American economy is terribly failing. And this hasn't started like this year or last year. It started the moment the Orange Man took over the office. And apparently, his promises were to make sure that he's going to make America great again. And a lot of companies have really dissolved. A lot of people have been laid off from jobs. A lot of things have really increased in prices and everything. And currently, there has been a release that from the Treasury, to be precise, that there's a very high chance that the American government is literally broke. Like, it is taking more loans from other people than they are actually making it. They have assets of only 6 trillion and liabilities of almost 47 trillion. You can imagine having a deficit of all that amount of money in a country where you promise that you are going to make things better. So now, if you're right there and you're feeling like the groceries are too expensive, the gas prices are too high, everything around you is too expensive, I want you to understand that the mortgages are going high. Everything around is going to be very expensive. Like, I just don't know what I feel about this. And you know what actually gets me? It is the fact that it's not like the United States government does not have money. It does have money. Because anyway, when you look at it, you will understand that everything is expensive because of taxes. Meaning that the common citizen of the United States is being taxed. But where is the tax dollar being taken to? Instead of paying debts that were there before so that you can be able to, maybe you can take some other debts, while you have already cleared the debts that you already had, you just choose that you're not going to pay those debts and you're going to add more debts so that you can be unable to pay completely. Or what is the logic? What is the thinking here? But anyway, as I was saying, it's not like the tax dollar is not there. It is there. Because people are paying their taxes. Every American is paying their taxes. But where is this money being channeled to? Instead of channeling in important things that might help, not even might help, that can help the American people, the money is being channeled elsewhere. I mean, the 1 trillion, I don't know, the 1 billion ballroom. What do you mean? All that money on a ballroom for security purposes, right? And we are already having a debt. Why can't we pay this debt? We decrease it. Imagine if you're paying a billion. It means that you're going to decrease that debt, right? It's not going to be constant. And you do not have to borrow 2 trillion a year to run again as a government. But that is not how the Republicans think, right? That is not how the MAGA people think. They think differently. They are wired differently. This is so disappointing. You know, there's a time in Africa we used to look at the United States and we all could admire it and be like, wow, the United States. Right now we're looking at it as a laughing stock because they are just as struggling as most of the African countries are. Everything that is happening in the United States is almost close to everything that is happening in the African countries right now. This is so disappointing. I don't even know what to say about this. All I can say is that this is disappointing in very many levels. Americans cannot afford good health care. They cannot afford good education systems. They cannot afford groceries. Gas is very expensive. Fuels very expensive. Living standards way too high. Taxes left, right, and center. And now you're telling them that they are running bankrupt. I mean, where is our tax dollar going? I don't know what you think about this. You can let me know what you think about it in the comment section. And if you're new here, remember to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share. And until next time, my beautiful people, it's goodbye from me.